I have wanted to make this video for a while now, because this is one of the most extraordinary stories Tolkien ever wrote. It's one of my favorites, but it's difficult to piece together out of the Silmarillion. So I want to place everything together for you, and I promise you won't be disappointed, because almost nobody tells it the right way around. Welcome to Tolkien Reflections. Now imagine this setting. We begin in a world where the elves could not die. We are in the early days after the creation of the elves, and things are going well. The world's name is not Middle-earth, at least not yet, not the way you know it. The world itself is called Arda. And in these early days, the elves don't live in the gray lands we'd recognize from the Lord of the Rings. The greatest of them live across the sea in a land called Valinor, the Blessed Realm, a paradise made and guarded by the godlike powers Tolkien calls the Valar. There is no sun yet, no moon, neither has been made. Valinor is lit instead by two great trees, one pouring out silver light, one gold, and their light isn't like sunlight. It's holy, it's alive. It is the most precious thing in the world, and it falls on a land that has never known a single bad thing. No war, no sickness, no hunger. The elves there are immortal, not as a blessing they earned, but simply as what they are. To be an elf in Valinor is to not die. In all the long ages of that light, in all the history of that deathless paradise, no one had ever died. The elves of Valinor did not even have a way to understand death because there was nothing to understand. They lived in the light, and the light did not end, and neither did they. Until the day that one of them died. Her name was Miriel, and she would become the first elf in the history of that blessed land ever to die. She did not die in battle, and she wasn't murdered. She died as a result of giving birth. Not the way we usually think of it, but the bearing of the child cost her her life. Tolkien tells us her strength had gone into the child, so that she became weary of living, and she lay down, and her spirit left her. The name of that child is Fëanor. If you know the Silmarillion, or if you're a bit of a Tolkien geek, you know that name very well. The clash between Fëanor and Morgoth would become the catalyst for the ruin of the First Age itself. So Fëanor is born into a paradise where nothing has ever been lost, and his arrival is the first loss. Now tell me Tolkien wasn't a genius. He is the only elf in all of Valinor who will grow up without a mother, in a place where mothers don't die. He carries a grief that not one single being around him can understand. He is, in a sense, the first person in paradise to have lost something. His mother even gave him his name, Fëanor, Spirit of Fire. Hold on to that picture of him, because we are about to watch him become something extraordinary, and then something truly terrible, and almost everyone who tells this story reaches for one word to explain all of it. Pride. And he was proud. But I don't think pride is the real answer. Pride is the thing you can see from the outside. What's underneath it is harder, and I think it's the actual key to him. So let me say it plainly now, and then show you it across his whole life. Because of his loss, Fëanor could never hold anything with an open hand. Everything he was given, his gifts, the light, even the people he loved, he gripped tightly as if it were his by right, and his alone to keep. He couldn't receive anything as a gift. He had to possess it completely, so that it could never be taken from him again. And there's one person in all of Valinor who understood him, who shared the strange wound of his beginning, who never once left his side, his father. Remember that. We'll come back to it, and when we do, everything turns. But first, the gift. Because you cannot understand what was lost here until you understand how much this elf was given. Fëanor grew into the single most gifted being the world had ever produced, and I don't mean that loosely. Tolkien almost means it as a measurement. He tells us Fëanor became the most subtle in mind and the most skilled in hand of all the elves, and elsewhere goes further still, the mightiest in all parts of body and mind, in skill, in strength, in beauty, in understanding. Not the greatest elf, the mightiest of all the children of the world's maker, the highest a created soul had ever reached. And what he loved was to make. While he was still young, he took the writing the elves already had and rebuilt it into something finer, a script so good that thousands of years later it is still the writing carved over the gates of Moria and burned into the One Ring itself. He made gems the like of which had never been seen. He made lamps holding a light that no wind or water could put out. He made crystals you could look into and see across great distances. We know them as the Palantiri. Fëanor is traditionally credited as their maker. The very same stones Saruman and the steward Denethor would gaze into to their ruin. An age and a half later, one elf in one lifetime invented half the wonders of the world. But all of it was a prelude, because the thing Fëanor is truly remembered for, the thing this whole story turns around, the thing the book itself is named for, is 3 jewels. The Silmarils. If I had to sum it up, this is what they were. Remember the light of those 2 trees, the holy, living, gold and silver light that was the most precious thing in the world. Fëanor found a way to capture it, to take that light and hold it, alive, inside 3 jewels of crystal so hard it could not be broken or even scratched. The light radiating inside of them made them glow intensely, and the crystals gave off a warmth you could feel standing near them. They were so holy that nothing evil could touch them without being burned. By every account, they were the most beautiful things ever made in the history of the world, and Fëanor made them by some art he never wrote down and could never repeat. Not even he could ever make their like again. And here is a detail almost every telling slides straight past, the one I think matters more than any other. The light inside the Silmarils, the thing that made them irreplaceable, Fëanor did not create it. He captured it. The light came from the trees. Its holiness had been set there long before by one of the Valar. What Fëanor actually did was take the most precious living thing in the world that was never his to begin with, and seal it inside something that could never be lost, never broken, never taken away from him. And that right there pretty much explains him in a single act. Because this is the pattern that runs through everything Fëanor ever does. He was given the greatest gifts any soul was ever given, and he could not hold a single one of them with an open hand. The light was a gift made by powers greater than him, meant to be shared by a whole world. And the moment it passed through his hands, it stopped being something the world shared and became something he owned. His, locked in crystal, held so tightly that before long he would let the whole world fall dark rather than open his hand and give any of it back. But we're not there yet. Right now, the Silmarils are simply the glory of Valinor, and Fëanor is simply its greatest son, and everything is still well. But the stage for tragedy is already set, sitting quietly inside the most beautiful thing anyone had ever made. His grip has not yet had a reason to close tightly, but it's about to be given one. Into this paradise comes the one being even greater than Fëanor, and far, far worse. His name is Melkor. He was the mightiest of all the powers that made the world, and also the first to turn against it, the original darkness, the source every later evil flows from. If the only Tolkien you know is the films, here is the simplest way to place him. Sauron, the great enemy of the Lord of the Rings. The one behind the ring was merely Melkor's servant. This is the master. Melkor had been a prisoner of the Valar for ages, chained long ago in the deep past, for the ruin he had worked on the world before the elves ever awoke. The long peace of Valinor existed precisely because he had been caught and bound. But he had served his sentence and he was set free. He had not changed. And of all the elves in that land, he set his eye on one elf in particular. You can understand why. Fëanor was the greatest of them, and the most isolated, the one with the wound none of them shared, the one whose grip was already quietly too tight. Melkor was the most cunning being who ever lived, and he could see exactly where to press. He could not corrupt Fëanor outright, and I want to be fair to Fëanor here, because it matters. There was no elf in the whole story who hated Melkor more than he did. Fëanor was never his servant, never his pupil, never on his side. But Melkor didn't need him as a servant. He only needed to whisper. He spread a lie, carefully through the bright corridors of paradise that Fëanor's half-brothers were plotting against him, that they meant to take his place as their father's heir, that they wanted his Silmarils. And here is why that particular lie worked. It didn't appeal to his pride. It threatened his grip. It told him that the things he held, his place, his father, his jewels, were about to be taken. And we already know what this soul does at the mere thought of losing what it holds. For the first time in the history of the Blessed Realm, weapons were made. Think about that. In a land that had never known violence, that had no enemies, no war, no reason for a blade, the greatest craftsman alive went into secret and forged swords. And then he drew one. At a gathering of his own family, Fëanor turned a naked blade on his own half-brother Fingolfin and told him to get out, or be cut down. The first threat of murder ever spoken in paradise. Brother against brother over a lie. For that, the powers banished him, 12 years away from the city for drawing a sword on his kin. And here, I have to stop and be honest, because this is exactly the place where a lot of tellings start quietly making excuses for him. And I don't think we should. Yes, he was lied to. Yes, the most manipulative being in existence engineered that fear on purpose, but the fear was his. The grip the lie closed around was already there before Melkor said a word. Understanding why a person breaks is not the same as deciding the breaking wasn't theirs. We can hold both of those at once, and with Fëanor, we have to. He is a victim of the greatest deceiver who ever lived. He is also a grown man who pulled a blade on his brother. Both are true. Keep them both because we're going to need them very soon. Now we need to look at his father. When Fëanor was banished, one person chose to go into exile with him. Not his half-brothers, not his people. His father, Finwë, the king. Finwë loved this difficult, brilliant, dangerous son so much that he gave up his own crown and his own city to follow him into the wilderness. Of all the bonds in Fëanor's life, this was the one that held. The one person who had been there since the beginning, since the death that made him, who never left, never doubted, never asked him to be anything other than what he was. In a soul that could not hold anything loosely, Finwë was the thing held tightest of all. The single anchor. And then came the day that light died. While the powers were gathered, and Fëanor with them, Melkor made his real move. With the help of a vast and ancient creature of darkness, Ungoliant. I'm sure you know her well by now, but if you don't, Ungoliant was a giant cosmic horror dressed as a spider. Melkor came to the two trees and destroyed them. The gold and the silver, the light that had lit paradise since before time was counted. Gone. For the first time, Valinor fell into true darkness, and in that darkness the powers turned to Fëanor, because the last of that light still existed, alive, in 3 jewels, his Silmarils. If he would give them up, let them be broken open, the trees might be brought back. The light of the whole world could be saved. But Fëanor refused. So let's look at the whole picture of what is happening right now. The light of all creation is dying, and one elf will not surrender 3 jewels to save it. It is almost unforgivable, but listen to what he says because it is the truest thing he ever says about himself. He says that to break them would be to break his own heart, and that he would sooner die. There are some deeds that may only be done once, he tells them. If these are unmade, he can never make them again. They are, to him, the irreplaceable thing. And a soul that cannot hold the irreplaceable with an open hand cannot open that hand even to save the world. But here is the cruelty hidden inside the moment, the thing that turns a selfish choice into a tragedy. While Fëanor stands there refusing, the choice is already meaningless, because Melkor has not gone to ground. Melkor has gone north, to the lonely fortress where Fëanor's treasures were kept, and there, in the dark, he has done the second thing that has never happened in this story. He has murdered Finwë, the father, the one anchor, the single person who shared the wound of Fëanor's beginning, and never once let go of him. The king who gave up his crown to follow his son into exile, killed in the dark by the greatest evil in the world. the first murder ever committed in the Blessed Realm, and the Silmarils, the light, the gift he could not hold as a gift, taken with him. Now look at the whole shape of this elf's life. It opened with the first death in the history of paradise, his mother, in giving him being. And now it detonates with the first murder in the history of paradise, his father, taken from him, along with the one thing he loved most after. Death entered the deathless land twice. Both times it came for him. Both times it took something he could not bear to hold loosely. A different soul might have broken here, might have wept, or despaired, or knelt. Fëanor does not break. A soul that cannot open its hand when you take from it the one thing it could never replace does not open. It closes. The grip becomes a fist. The fist becomes a weapon. And the spirit of fire, who once caught light in crystal, turns at last to burning. What he does next will doom his people, his sons, and himself. And it begins with an oath. In the darkness of that ruined paradise, Fëanor stands before his people and does two things that set the whole age of the world on its course. First, he names the enemy. He calls Melkor a new name, Morgoth, the black foe of the world, and that is the name the enemy carries forever after. From this moment, Melkor is Morgoth. And then Fëanor swears a dark oath. It is one of the most terrible things Tolkien ever wrote, and he tells us so himself. He simply calls it terrible. Fëanor and his 7 sons stand together and they swear, calling upon the name of the one God above all the powers as their witness, which is what makes the oath unbreakable, that they will pursue with hatred and vengeance to the ends of the earth anyone, of any kind, good or evil, who takes or keeps a Silmaril from them. Not Morgoth. Anyone. In a single breath, a father and his 7 sons bind themselves forever to make war on the entire world over 3 jewels. And the horror of that oath is that it outlives every reason for it. It will drag Fëanor's sons, some of whom are good, one of whom is a gentle poet and singer who should never have been within 1,000 miles of any of this, into doing monstrous things for centuries, long after it has stopped making any sense, because an oath sworn on the name of God cannot be unsworn. Fëanor doesn't just doom himself in that moment. He reaches forward across hundreds of years and dooms his children. And notice what the oath is really about. His father has just been murdered, the anchor of his entire life gone. And the oath he swears in that grief does not so much as mention Finwë. It is about the jewels. Even now, even here, the thing he cannot let go of is the thing he made and owned and lost. The grief comes out, but it comes out shaped like possession. He has lost the one person he loved most, and he answers it by swearing to reclaim his property no matter who has to die. And people start dying almost at once. To chase Morgoth, Fëanor needs to cross the sea to Middle-earth, and for that he needs ships. There is another people of the elves, gentle, sea-loving, the great shipwrights of that coast, and they have the ships. They will not give them up for a war they want no part of. So Fëanor takes them by force. And for the first time in the history of the world, elf kills elf. The shipwrights resist, and Fëanor's people cut them down. People who were never anyone's enemy, slaughtered on their own harbor for their boats. It is remembered ever after as the first kinslaying, and it is one of the darkest things in all of elvish history. The fire that once caught the holy light of the trees and crystal is now just fire, burning through whatever stands between Fëanor and the thing he has sworn to take back. And then he does something worse. Worse, I think, than the killing, because the killing at least had the heat of battle in it, and this is cold. After seizing the ships, there aren't enough to carry everyone across the sea in one crossing. So Fëanor takes the ships, sails across with the people loyal to him, and abandons the rest. He leaves his own half-brother and thousands of his own people stranded on the far shore in the dark. And when he reaches the other side and one of his sons asks when they will send the ships back for the others, Fëanor has the entire fleet burned. Burns it on the beach, so it can never return. He strands the people he claims to lead out of spite and suspicion, and watches the boats burn. In one of Tolkien's later writings, he didn't even realize that one of his own sons had stayed aboard, asleep, and burned with them. This is what the grip has become. Not a man holding the irreplaceable anymore. A man who will burn his own people on a shore rather than share a single ship. Rather than trust. Rather than open his hand even an inch. He reaches Middle-earth, wins the first battle against Morgoth's forces, and then, burning with rage, he outruns his own army. Charges ahead, alone, toward the very gates of Morgoth's fortress, as though by sheer will he could take the Silmarils back single-handed. And the enemy unleashes demons of fire and shadow, Balrogs, and surrounds him. He fights with unbelievable ferocity alone against several at once, wounded again and again. But he is one elf against the powers of the dark, and in the end, they strike him down. As he lies dying, his sons reach him, and the demons fall back. And Fëanor looks up at the black towers of Morgoth's stronghold, and with the clear sight that comes at the moment of death, he understands the truth, that he will never get the Silmarils back, that his people will never throw down those towers, that all of it, the oath, the murder of innocents, the burning ships, his father's death, his own, was for nothing. And here is his final act, and the one I find hardest to forgive. Knowing it is hopeless, knowing the quest cannot be won, he gathers his sons and binds them to keep the oath anyway, to pursue it to the end, to avenge him, to never lay it down. He has a last chance, with his dying breath, to release his children from the doom he laid on them, to open his hand one final time and let them go free. And he cannot do it. Even dying, even knowing it's all for nothing, he cannot open his hand. As if to say, if I cannot have it, none of you may be free of it. It is the exact same gesture as refusing to give up the Silmarils to save the light of the world. The grip, closing one last time on his own children. And then he dies, and we are told his spirit was so fierce that as it left him, his body crumbled to ash, something that, as far as Tolkien ever tells us, happened to no one else, before or since. The spirit of fire burned out its own body on the way out of the world. Fëanor dies near the very beginning of the war he started. The fight over the Silmarils, though, that goes on for centuries without him, and it costs almost everyone everything. That's an enormous story, and I'll tell it properly another time. But here's the part you need for where we're going. By the end of it all, the 3 Silmarils are scattered to the 3 corners of the world. One is lost forever into a great chasm of fire, deep in the earth. One is cast into the sea and sinks beyond reach. And the third is carried up into the sky, bound to the brow of a single mariner who sails the heavens with it forever. If you've ever heard that the brightest star at dusk was once a jewel, this is the story underneath that. Earth, sea, and sky. The light Fëanor caught, broken apart and flung to the far edges of creation. And there it stays, for age upon age upon age, until the very end of the world. So, after hearing the story, how do you feel? Was Fëanor a villain? People will tell you he was the great villain of that age, and they can point to the dead, and they are not wrong. Others will defend him. He was lied to, he was grieving, he was pushed by the cruelest being who ever lived, and they are not wrong either. But I don't think villain is the right word, and I don't think it's the interesting one. I think villain lets him off too easily. It makes him a type, when what he really was is something much sadder. Go back to where we started. To a child born into a paradise that had never lost anything, and his arrival was the first loss. The one elf who carried grief in a world that had no word for it. He never met his mother. She gave her life to make him. And I think everything he ever did after that, every wonder he built and every horror he caused, was one soul doing one thing, refusing to hold anything with an open hand. He was given the greatest gifts a creature was ever given, and he could not receive a single one of them as a gift. The light wasn't his, and he made it his. His sons weren't his to doom, and he doomed them. His grief, when it came out as a fist. He could make anything, except peace with losing something. That was the one thing the greatest maker who ever lived could never make. And Tolkien left him one strange, distant mercy, though you won't find it in the Silmarillion as it's printed today. It comes from the way he first ended the whole story, in older drafts his son later set aside, a final prophecy about how the world itself will end. It goes like this. At the very end of all things, there will be one last battle. The powers of light against the returned darkness, Morgoth loosed one final time, and the world as we know it unmade. But afterward, and this is the part that is amazing, the 3 Silmarils are found again, recovered from the 3 places they were lost, one drawn up out of the deep earth, one raised from the bottom of the sea, and one brought down out of the sky, where it had been carried as a star. The light Fëanor caught scattered to the corners of creation, gathered back at the end of everything. And then they are given to Fëanor, brought back from the dead at the close of the world, and handed the 3 jewels he gave everything to make and everything to keep. The jewels he let the world fall dark rather than surrender. The jewels his father died for. The jewels he doomed his sons to chase across centuries of blood. And this time, he gives them up. This last time, he opens his hand. He lets the light go willingly, and the jewels are broken open at last, and their fire pours back into the dead trees, and they bloom again. And the light that had been locked in crystal, hoarded, fought over, killed for, finally goes out over the whole world. Not held by anyone, not owned by anyone, shared by everything. The mountains are leveled so that nothing can keep it in. The dead awake. The world is made new. The Maker at the very end of everything. Finally unmaking. The fist, after all the ages of the world, finally opening. I don't know if that counts as redemption. Tolkien never quite says, and perhaps that's why he set the ending aside, but I think it's telling, almost unbearably so, that the only healing he could imagine for Fëanor was the single act this soul was never able to perform while he lived, to let go of the thing he loved most, and not destroy the world over it, to open his hand, to give the light away and watch it become something greater than anything he could ever have kept. He was born from the first loss in the history of paradise, a hand closing around a wound it could never undo. And at the very end of all things, in the last act of the whole story, he finally gets to open it. Thank you for watching. This is Tolkien Reflections.